tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline.
Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight.
Today, I can announce to the House that this offence will be brought into force this week.
The government has sent a warning to Elon Musk. He's probably shivering in his boots that his platform X, formerly known as Twitter, could be banned in the United Kingdom if it does not tackle anti-Semitism and sexualised image generation. This is more than a tech problem, it's a free speech issue. Is this really about online safety? Or is Labour eager to ban the platform because it's critical of His Majesty's government? Also tonight.
I go home at night believing what he says. The answer is yes.
The latest costs of net zero have been revealed as estimates show the project could reach £4.5 billion over the next 25 years, nearly twice the size of the UK economy. While China's economy continues to boom on the back of coal-fired power, is it time we scrap the green scam making us cold and poor? Iran is on the brink of a revolution as its people rise up against the oppressive Islamic regime that's been ruling the nation since 1979. But despite prescribing Palestine action and arresting grannies, the government is yet to do anything about the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps. Why is Labour being so wet on this issue? Plus,
I think the issue is that because I was a gay man in his circle, I was kept separate from what he was doing in the sexual side.
Lord Mandelson has given his first interview since being forced out of his role as the US ambassador over his links to the disgraced paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, suggesting he did not know about Epstein's crimes because he's gay, and then refusing to apologise. Is it unfair to taint someone by association, or will this interview become Lord Mandelson's Prince Andrew moment? State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most penetratingly percipient panel, the former Conservative MP and Minister, Sir John Redwood, and the former Labour MP, Stephen Pound. As always, let me know what you think, mailmog at gbnews.com. But now, it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Katie Byrne.
Jacob, thank you and good evening. The headlines at 8:02. Technology Secretary Liz Kendall says no woman or child should live in fear of having their images manipulated by technology. That's as she announced that creating non-consensual intimate images will be made a criminal offence this week. Speaking in the House of Commons, Liz Kendall said the creation of these images is child sexual abuse, adding that lives have been devastated by this content. The intervention comes as Britain's media regulator, Ofcom, has launched a formal investigation into X over claims its AI tool Grok is being used to generate sexualised images of women and children. Ofcom says it gave the company a deadline to explain how it's protecting UK users and has now fast-tracked a probe into whether it's breaking the Online Safety Act. The Technology Secretary said sexualised images created by the AI chatbot are weapons of abuse.
Sharing intimate images without someone's consent or threatening to share them, including images of people in their underwear, is a criminal offence for individuals and for platforms. The Data Act, passed last year, made it a criminal offence to create or request the creation of non-consensual intimate images. And today, I can announce to the House that this offence will be brought into force this week.
Elsewhere today, former Conservative Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi has defected to Reform UK, declaring Britain is drinking at the last chance saloon. Standing alongside Nigel Farage in London, Mr Zahawi said the country really does need Farage as Prime Minister to pull it back from what he called a dark and dangerous chapter. Mr Farage hailed the move as proof that Reform UK is not a one-man band. Well, the Conservative Party has hit back, calling Mr Zahawi a has-been, while Labour Party Chair Anna Turley described him as a discredited politician. To the Middle East, where Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper has spoken to authorities in Iran, saying that the Iranian government must immediately end this violence. It comes as the country is entering a third week of unrest, with a rising death toll and the regime tightening its grip on nationwide protests. Human rights groups say now that nearly 650 people have been killed and more than 10,000 arrested, as protests harden into open defiance of the supreme leader. The Foreign Secretary went on to say that the killing and brutal repression of peaceful protesters in Iran is horrific. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has said tonight that Iran is sending different messages to the US than those in public, adding that President Trump is not afraid to use military force on the country, but wants diplomacy. And tens of thousands of people across Sussex and Kent have started the week without running water after Kent County Council declared a major incident. South East Water blames Storm Goretti, freezing weather and a power failure at a pumping station, with 14 postcodes still dry around East Grinstead, Frant and Tunbridge Wells. Schools, libraries and even parts of the local hospital have been forced to shut, with bottled water being handed out to keep essential services running. Local MP Mike Martin says the situation is bizarre, warning that the water company must now get a grip. Those are your latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Jacob.
Tune in to GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player, on Nation Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Welcome back to Save the Nation. The government has warned Elon Musk that his social media platform Twitter could be banned in the United Kingdom if he does not do more to tackle anti-Semitism and the creation of sexualised images. Labour insists this is about safety, but it's also perhaps more importantly a question of free speech and the limits of political power. Steve Lee, the Communities Secretary, has said the government is prepared to legislate to prevent social media companies from profiting from anti-Semitism. He said these images resemble propaganda from the Third Reich and has promised that fines and even bans are options if the platform failed to act. It's very odd because Ofcom's meant to be independent and it's not for ministers to decide on fines anyway, and Labour's had a dreadful problem with anti-Semitism, so it's all completely weird that he's saying this now. Nonetheless, the ever-authoritarian Ofcom is investigating Twitter over its AI tool Grok, which has been used to generate sexualised images of women and, in some cases, children. Peter Carl, the business secretary, said earlier today...
Ofcom have all the powers to enforce the law. Now, the law dictates that no hateful or illegal content goes online, onto social media platforms. Ofcom have asked X to provide information. They provided it. Ofcom are now doing an expedited investigation into whether they have stepped outside of the law or not. If they have, then this government expects the independent regulator and enforcement agency to enforce the law to the full extent of the law.
Well, at least Kyle has a better understanding of Ofcom's role in these things than his cabinet colleague. Never mind. Early this afternoon, the Science, Innovation and Technology Secretary, Liz Kendall, announced the government would be making it offence to create explicit images with AI under the Online Safety Act.
Sharing intimate images without someone's consent or threatening to share them, including images of people in their underwear, is a criminal offence for individuals and for platforms. The Data Act, passed last year, made it a criminal offence to create or request the creation of non-consensual intimate images. And today, I can announce to the House that this offence will be brought into force this week.
So anti-Semitism is obviously a serious problem, and the creation of non-consensual sexual images is revolting. Platforms ought to take responsibility and ought to stop it. But the question is whether threatening to ban an entire platform is a proportionate or appropriate response. A ban is not regulation. It's the most extreme sanction available to the state. When a government threatens to remove access to a major platform used daily by millions of people, it's no longer enforcing the law, but trying to stop debate. Twitter is one of the primary spaces in which political debate takes place. It's where government policy is challenged, where journalists, campaigners and citizens argue openly, where the government's mocked for being useless, where those in power are criticised. The concern is that legitimate aims, such as tackling anti-Semitism and protecting children, are being used to justify a response that goes beyond specific harms. And you see it, they love it, don't they? Look at those Labour ministers. They're filled with glee that they can have a pop at Elon Musk, who they don't like. They think he's old smelly socks and is against them. So we've seen it today that they find it easy to criminalise things online under the jurisdiction of the Online Safety Act, and therefore we should worry that they will use these powers further to include content and opinions the government doesn't approve of. What about a picture of Sir Keir Starmer looking a bit daft, or one of Rachel Reeves not looking as Chancellor-esque as she might wish? Do you think that might be banned too? Will mockery, will satire be banned because it might upset people? So once you've got technologies like AI, image generation will not disappear because one platform is punished. If activity is forced off a regulated platform, inevitably it will go elsewhere to the darker corners of the internet. Driving content underground doesn't eliminate harm, but increases it. There's also concern of setting bad precedents. Once the principle is established, the government can threaten to ban a platform because it posts content ministers don't like. Think what Steve Reeves had to say. The scope of that power will grow. Today it's AI imagery, but tomorrow it may be simple criticism of the government. It's not about defending Elon Musk. It's about defending the principle of freedom of expression, which must include controversial speech, sometimes that is offensive, and certainly that is critical of those in power. If it only applies to views the government likes, then speech is no longer free. Regulators like Ofcom have far too much power to fine companies a percentage of their global revenue, to seek court orders to block access, and this authority must be exercised with restraint if it's proper at all. Otherwise, regulation becomes intimidation. So is this about online safety alone, or is there an appetite to curb a platform that is critical of the government? Protecting women and children is important, and protecting freedom of speech and democratic debate is too. And these two principles ought not to be incompatible unless we allow political convenience for a failing government to blur the line between safety and censorship. It matters most when it's inconvenient. It matters most when it puts those in power under the spotlight. As always, whilst you're still free to do it and it won't be censored by Keir Starmer, Rees-Mogg, GBNews.com, because I'm now joined by technology and free speech lawyer Preston Byrne. Preston, thank you very much for joining me. Is this an attack on freedom of speech, or is it just a sensible regulatory approach to stop fake internet pornography?
I think we have to look at what Ofcom is doing to X in the context of what it's been doing to other American targets for the entire year. I represented every American target of the Online Safety Act until they decided to go after X. So I'm kind of annoyed with them that I now don't represent all of the targets, but rather 4 out of 5. And the other targets that they've targeted are targets which host plain text speech, which is wrongthink and not permitted in the United Kingdom, but which is constitutionally protected in the United States. And what we can see is that Ofcom here is using an example where there is no disagreement, right, between the US and the UK, for example, over CSAM imagery portraying minors. That is extraordinarily illegal in the United States. And when it's discovered on an American platform, it has to be proactively removed and reported to law enforcement immediately. And usually users are customarily banned immediately thereafter. But what we've seen is that they've immediately then started to tread onto political speech and constitutionally protected space from our perspective, in that if this new law that they proposed becomes law this week, as they promised to do, you can't put a picture of Keir Starmer in his underwear or a bikini, which people are doing as a manner of, as a fashion of legitimate political protest to the government's intervention against this platform. So they started with something which is eminently defensible and where there's no disagreement whatsoever between the United States and the UK, which is that images of minors shouldn't be allowed to proliferate online. But then what they did is they swiftly moved into the domain of politically protected speech. And that's been the pattern that they've done all year. They always say, listen, it's all about kids, it's all about safety. And then what they do is they start censoring political speech very, very shortly thereafter, and conflating the two issues as one issue when in fact they're very separate.
So is there a grey area with celebrities who aren't politicians having sexualized images made of them? I mean, I'm thinking obviously of famous actresses who may be digitally altered by AI. Would you think that the social media companies should draw the line at that? Because there's a great tradition of satire of politicians showing politicians not fully clothed.
Yeah, that's one of those areas where in the United States, it's actually an emerging area of law. And there is some discussion as to whether that sort of content is protected by our free speech doctrines or not. So in the case of California, for example, non-consensual intimate images, those have been banned in the state of California. And so I don't think anybody has any problem with that. I personally don't have a problem with it, just, with banning that sort of imagery, or rather enacting a content moderation policy, which does that. I think that's a good idea and a good business decision for these companies. But the question is, yes, there is a gray area. And the question is, when do you cross the line? And looking at what the UK's proposals have done, there's significant potential for those proposals to then intrude on legitimate political speech. For example, the depiction of the prime minister in a bikini, as we've seen a lot of on X. I can't see that there's any language in the existing statutes that they proposed that would carve out an image of Keir Starmer in a bikini. Now, that's something I don't want to see either when I'm using.
No, most people wouldn't want to see that. It'd be a rather untasteful picture. What I want to ask you about, just to be absolutely clear, because I think you've answered this, but I want to be really forthright about it. Twitter would stop pictures of children being undressed by AI. That would simply not be allowed on Twitter.
That's not allowed in the United States. Absolutely not. No, that's absolutely prohibited and extraordinarily illegal with very hefty criminal penalties. So there's no disagreement between the UK and the United States on that. Where there is disagreement is when we start to stray into protected categories of speech. And you'd have to ask X, right? I don't speak for X. I don't work for X.
Yeah, I understand that.
You'd have to ask them what they think. But there's no disagreement really among anybody that you shouldn't have images, CSAM material online. Where the dispute arises is when you look at Ofcom's wider pattern of behavior, which is where they take something where everybody agrees and then they assume, right? So for example, Peter Kyle, he was just giving a statement where he said, listen, hateful or explicit content must be taken down. Well, in the United States, hate speech, for example, as it is commonly understood, is protected by the U.S. Constitution. So that's why the Americans look at these proposals with skepticism, is because those proposals do violate our constitutional principles.
Well, I will tell you that the only bit of the American Constitution I'm actively jealous of is your First Amendment. So thank you very much for joining me this evening. And let me now go to my panelists, John Redwood and Stephen Pound. Stephen, Gilray cartoons, they showed famous politicians, even the king.
They showed King George III, au naturel. Yeah. But you've raised a very, very interesting point, Sir Jake. Look, freedom to speak without causing offence is no freedom at all. Real freedom of speech is you are able to cause offence, and I think we'd actually defend that. On the old adage, freedom for the wolf is not necessarily freedom for the lamb. But what you rightly indicate here is this, what you call the grey area, and I think you're absolutely right to call it that. What I can't quite understand about this is how you can actually take out a section of the platform of Grok. I think you've either got it or you haven't got it. And I think your argument about if it's banned, it will then go underground. That's the sort of the cigarette tax argument. You know, if you tax cigarettes...
But that's exactly what's happened. The tax revenues from cigarettes going down, most cigarettes...
Indeed, but people are living longer and the hospitals are not being clogged up with people suffering from...
Look, I'm not against cigarette taxes.
That's a slightly different thing. But look, at the moment, the whole business of Elon Musk, there are people in this country who are slightly running scared of him. And equally, he is very, very sensitive. He doesn't control Wikipedia. Wikipedia is incredibly critical of him. And he's constantly trying to actually buy or take over Wikipedia, which he can't do. But on this particular thing, the one thing that actually cheered me was actually hearing the government announce that they're going to do something within 5 days. Sadly, it may be the wrong thing.
But they're only doing it in 5 days because they haven't done it in the last
in the online
400 days. That act was through Parliament. It just required the Secretary of State to implement it.
Allow me what little comfort.
All right, I will. John, think of John Major, who used to be portrayed by cartoonists with his underpants over his trousers. That seems to me to be perfectly legitimate political satire. It may not have been very nice for him, but that's tough for you in politics.
Well, I've been in a friendly cartoon that didn't have many clothes on me. I didn't object to it. It was all part of the rough and tough.
That you are, but it seems to me that this is being too heavy-handed, and it suits the government. And was I reading too much into it, that they all looked as pleased as Punch to be able to say that we can bash Twitter?
No, I thought you were excellent. I agree with everything you said, and it was a great relief to hear your guest down the line being very clear that sexualised images of children is completely unacceptable. It's a crime here, it's a crime in America, and it's a law enforcement issue. And ministers and the enforcement authorities and the CPS need to get together and make sure this is done promptly and every time it appears, and I'm sure they should expect collaboration from the main services. But my worry is that by picking on X, this is a very lively and developing company generating a lot of freedoms and a lot of money, as well as making some mistakes. And we can't go on upsetting all the things in the modern world that are going to create wealth and freedom and prosperity.
Well, and upsetting the American president too, because Donald Trump, who has quite a good relationship with Starmer, one thing you can say for Starmer, he's done well in the relationship with the US. Donald Trump isn't going to like this, is he?
Well, no, but he, on the other hand, he has a very poor relationship with Elon Musk. I mean, that's changed a little bit. But this kind of segues into what's happening in Australia with the banning of the Online Safety Act, the banning actually access to these platforms for children under 16. I think there's a huge argument now. To a certain extent, I think we're trying to close the stable door. I think it's out there. And I think if this platform is shut, there are a multitude of other ones. I'm not the most computer literate or savvy person in the world, but, I have children, I have grandchildren, and they tell me you can basically access what you want. I'd rather like to see a sort of a moral uprising in this country where people don't want to see... Who, in God's name, wants to see a picture of a child in their underwear? Only an absolute filthy pervert.
Yes, indeed.
I think I'd address that issue rather than...
And enforce that,
yes. Precisely so.
And if you want to see an example of closing the stable door after the horse bolted, it's on my YouTube channel when I was looking at my quails and one of them came out and I closed the door immediately afterwards. So you can see the real thing.
Well, that's a new metaphor.
Closing the cage door after the quail has bolted. Anyway, thank you to my panel. In a moment.
Does this guy go home at night believing what he says? The answer is yes.
The latest costs of net zero have been revealed as estimates show it's gone up 1,000-fold since I last spoke to you. I got it wrong last time. £4.5 trillion in the next 25 years, not billion, trillion pounds, nearly twice the size of the UK economy. Is it time we scrap the green scam making us cold and poor?
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
The University of Bristol has been threatened with legal action by a leading academic who led a recent government review into sex and gender data collection.
Well, Professor Alice Sullivan claims her freedom of speech was restricted after a talk she gave was disrupted by a trans rights protest.
Protesters actually scaled the walls of the building. We were in a first-floor lecture theatre, and they climbed the walls in order to bang on the windows and sort of howl through the windows. It felt incredibly surreal in there. It was like some kind of zombie apocalypse. And they were setting off fire alarms to very loudly disrupt my talk. Eventually, we had to all move to another lecture theatre. And I learned afterwards that people trying to attend the talk had been severely disrupted by protesters who were not asked to stand behind barriers or anything like that. They were just allowed to intimidate and obstruct people who had come to hear me speak.
It sounds like a fairly severe dereliction of duty on behalf of the university. I mean, obviously everyone has a right to protest anything, and you'd think at a university anyone would have a right to give a talk, and yet there is this sort of heckler's veto that some try to play to try and keep out ideas with which they disagree. I mean, it seems to just go against the fundamental ethos of what higher education should be in this country.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I fully support people's right to peaceful protest, but this was not a peaceful protest. It was really quite violent.
GB News, the People's Channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we were talking about the ban on Twitter, and the mailmogs have come in electronically, not, I think, over Twitter, as it happens. Anyway, Phil says, no one banned saucy postcards at the seaside. We used to pick saucy postcards, just write our names on them, then send them back to family members. We must not lose our humour. Surely, with technology as is today, they can put things in place to stop this happening to anyone under 18. Labour doesn't like being criticised. That's a sign of a dictatorship. And John says, Jacob, free speech is one thing, but deep fake AI is something else and needs to be controlled. Musk is thin-skinned and needs to be put back in his box and the lid firmly affixed. The true cost of net zero, which is making us cold and poor, is being exposed. New estimates suggest decarbonising the UK economy could cost more than £4.5 trillion over the next 25 years, nearly twice the size of the UK economy today. Under the plans, households and businesses will be forced to pay for new boilers, cars and infrastructure, while countries like China continue to expand coal power and reap the economic benefits. Green zealots argue the transition will eventually cut energy bills. But is it time for the net zero con to end? Well, my panel is still here. It's John Redwood and Stephen Pound. John, £4.5 trillion is £4.5 trillion that we do not have.
Yes, indeed, and a lot of it will have to be borrowed either by the public or private sectors, and it will be a huge burden of debt. But we're already building up colossal liabilities because these new contracts that are being offered for people to produce wind and solar energy on an intermittent basis are colossally expensive and are guarantees for 15 to 20 years. And if we go into a prolonged period when, for example, gas prices are much more realistic, that is going to be unaffordable. It will mean we deindustrialise even more quickly, and householders are left with a huge bill.
Do you think the government should renege on those deals, should take the example of the super tax on oil companies and tax the wind and renewable companies in a similar way if they want to get out of this? Or do you think that a British government should always stick to the commitments of previous governments?
I think it may have to renegotiate them. And, of course, it's always an option to put in taxes because there's no guarantee to these people that some of their revenue won't be taxed back. And so there is a negotiating basis for the government. But there has to be a more realistic approach, because at the moment we're building up colossal liabilities. And also, and I've been hearing an event today about grid, and the expert there was saying there's no way that by 2030 we can have more grid sufficient to allow for all these renewables to come down from Scotland, where they're more likely to be. And so the whole thing is totally unrealistic. We're going to run out of power.
Stephen, the grid issue is a major problem, isn't it? Because the grid was built to deal with large generation going to diversified users. Having diversified users going to diversified users is a much more complicated and expensive operation, which is going to cost billions and billions.
Well, not necessarily. A couple of things firstly. China is decarbonising. China is not opening new coal-fired power stations. China is actually using a lot less coal. The second thing is you can pluck a figure from the air and come up with that 4.5 trillion figure. There's no real basis for it. But for me, the key issue here is energy security. I do not want to be in hock as a person, as a citizen of this country, to Russia and China.
So we should start fracking then, shouldn't we?
I entirely agree. I couldn't agree more.
That would give us energy security and cheap energy.
Well, but also low modular reactors. We should actually, and we are. The government has got the message on nuclear. There's no question about that. But your point about the grid is...
Yeah, but we're going to close most of our nuclear reactors.
No,
so
most of the...
we won't have more nuclear for years, even if they start building.
Sizewell B and Sizewell C are under construction at the moment. The problem is, under the contracts that exist already, it's a Chinese company. So it's the Chinese and the French seem to be the only people who can build it. That sticks in my throat. I mean, the idea that only the French and the Chinese can build a nuclear reactor, when we were the world leaders in nuclear power generation and hydroelectric generation.
Well, what are we going to do for the next 5 to 10 years before any of this comes on stream? Because at the moment we can see how we're going to have less power. Very difficult to see we're going to get more. We're going to have to close some gas power stations, which we need, because they're getting too old.
Well,
it's really
it is on stream already. And don't forget, there's been 15 occasions last year when over 50% of our power usage was actually generated by renewables. But here's the key thing.
And there have been quite a lot of times when actually none was generated, because you get cold periods in the winter with no wind. We just had one.
Storage.
Yeah, but you've got to cover those somehow.
We don't have storage.
Yeah, no, we don't have storage. And the point you make about the grid is important. The grid was actually overloaded just before Christmas, when we had that period of high winds. The grid couldn't take any more. But look,
and we were paying for electricity we couldn't absorb.
Yeah, but this is, look, ultimately, the sun, the wind will last forever. Gas and coal won't.
Yeah, but they only come and go.
John, the curse of politicians is thinking for today and not thinking for tomorrow. Maybe as a grandfather, I'm starting to take these things a bit seriously. I want to worry about the sort of world my grandchildren come into.
Well, we've got to get there, Stephen.
I'm sorry, I don't want them dependent on Russian
You've got our nuclear's closing, you're going to have some gas closing, you had days when there's very little sun or wind. What is going to keep the lights on?
We're building small modular reactors as we speak.
No, we're not.
Yeah, we are.
There won't be any of them delivering power for the next 10 years.
We're building.
Well, I think, to be pedantic, we're in the order issuing phase.
We haven't even got a design
I don't think
yet.
a single bit of kit has actually been made for them.
We're going to spend millions on necessary design and safety work. We're not even anywhere near letting a contract.
I think we're pretty far down the line on that. But there's things like this Swansea Bay tidal scheme. If you go to Portugal, you see the whole of Lisbon gets powered by tidal power coming in from the bay there. We could do that in Swansea Bay.
Yeah, but we chose not to.
I know, but
because it was going to cost billions. It was going to be enormously expensive. Yeah. Whereas gas generation is very cheap to build. It's a known technology. Yeah. It doesn't need the upgrading of the grid, and we're sitting on trillions of cubic feet of gas if only we had the wit to get it out.
Jacob, if I spend money insulating my house, that's costing me a lot of money in the short term. It's saving me a lot of money in the long term. It's about time we started thinking about the long term and not about...
people are doing that, and that's a perfectly sensible investment, but it's not going to solve this problem. And given that the Labour Party wants to convert all of us to electric cars and electric heating, we need colossal increases in the amount of power when we're asking ourselves now, or we should be, can we even keep as much power as we can currently generate?
Well, as you rightly say, this is a question of infrastructure, that we actually need to develop it. But,
well, of course. Well, when are we going to do it?
But look what the Victorians did. The Victorians actually had Bessemer steel converters, and they actually had a whole new industrial...
Yeah, but they didn't have our planning system. And
we're very lucky. We're really thrilled to have a statement from a Department of Energy and Security Net Zero spokesman who said these figures are wrong and will misrepresent Nestlé's illustrative scenarios, which clearly set out the vast majority of this potential expenditure would happen in any case. This isn't true. Let me just pause there. Wouldn't happen anyway. I was speaking the other day to somebody who knows all about the upgrades of the grid, and the grid would not need these billions and billions spent on it if it remained mass generation to multi-points. It's the changing it from multi-point to multi-point that's giving the cross. This government just isn't right. They use a base scenario that assumes the grid has to do these upgrades. I ought to read the rest of the statement, which has disappeared, but it's on the screen. You can read it for yourself. These figures are wrong, you know what they say. It's not quite true.
At least you didn't say it was hot air.
Lot of old gas. In a moment. Iran is on the brink of a revolution as its people rise up against the oppressive Islamic regime ruling the nation since 1979. But despite prescribing Palestine action and arresting grannies, the government is yet to do anything about the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Why is Labour being so wet on this issue?
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, here's your latest holiday sun forecast brought to you by the Met Office. On Tuesday, we'll see some unsettled weather across the western Med with some snow across the hills further east. So confirmation then of some outbreaks of rain on Tuesday across the Canaries, Madeira, parts of western Spain and Portugal. Mostly fine, as I say, across the central part of the Med there, certainly for Italy, 1 or 2 showers and some bright spells too, but a risk of snow certainly across the hills of Turkey. As for the coming few days, well, things generally quieten down, but we'll see further rain at times across western parts.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello again. Very good evening to you. I'm here with your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Quite a mixed picture across the UK as we go through tonight and into tomorrow. Some places will see some mist and fog patches, other places having some outbreaks of rain. Although the area of low pressure, which has brought strong winds across northern parts through today, is now clearing, and so those winds are dropping out, we do have a front pushing in across parts of Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, and later into parts of northern England and Wales, where we are going to see some wet weather at times. Staying mostly dry there across central southern England and Wales. Cloud building through the night, some low clouds, some mist quite possible, and actually staying quite mild here. Temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Markedly colder though across northern parts of Scotland where we have clear skies. As a result, a relatively harsh frost in some places, and also some icy stretches to watch out for. Could cause some problems on the roads first thing tomorrow morning. Otherwise, as we go through tomorrow morning, well, it's a bright, cold, icy start across northern Scotland, across western southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of northern England and Wales. A wet start with that front pushing its way in, and then another front's coming up from the south, so it could be quite a bit of rain across southern counties as you're heading out the door tomorrow morning, and that rain then pushes its way northeastwards across much of central and eastern parts of southern England as well. Some of that rain could be quite heavy as we go through the day. It could cause some localised flooding in a few spots. That front towards the northwest also makes its way south and eastwards across other parts of England and Wales, with something a bit cooler coming in from the northwest. Not as cold as last week, but nonetheless a chillier feel compared to today. Then after a cold and quite widely frosty start to the day tomorrow, it is actually looking largely fine. Lots of bright sunny weather to be had through the bulk of the day, but there's another system coming in from the west, and that's going to bring some cloud and rain as we go later on. Now on Thursday there's a potential for a deep area of low pressure to push in, so that could bring some very strong winds and heavy rain.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Iran could be on the brink of a revolution, with mass protests erupting against an Islamic regime that's ruled by force since 1979. Reports suggest hundreds, if not thousands, of Iranians have been murdered as the authorities respond with brutal repression and threats of execution. The government says it stands with the Iranian people, yet it refuses to prescribe the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the regime's enforcers at home and sponsors of terror abroad. Labour moved swiftly to ban Palestine action. So why is it being so wet over the IRGC? Well, I'm very pleased to be joined now by the former Home Secretary and Attorney General, Suella Braverman. Suella, thank you for coming in. You actually had dealings with the IRGC. Why is it not being banned yet, and why should it be banned?
It's disgraceful, frankly, that this government is refusing to take action to prescribe the IRGC. And really, their actions speak much more loudly than their words. So warm words and we stand with the people and hashtags and whatnot on and other symbolic gestures mean nothing at this critical time. Frankly, the previous Conservative government should have prescribed the IRGC. It was something I lobbied for in government, but was blocked.
Why didn't we? Why was it blocked?
So it was largely the civil servants. I'm often reluctant to blame civil servants, but the Foreign Office mandarins had a collective view that prescribing the IRGC would be detrimental to the British national interest. And they were just hell-bent against it. And no Prime Minister really gripped it, and no Foreign Secretary really was strong enough to go against that civil service view.
What was the counter-argument that they put as to why it would be against British national interests to prescribe a known terrorist organisation?
Well, their argument was that the IRGC is not... They would debate that it was a terrorist organisation, first of all, something that was based on very flimsy ground, given that we know the IRGC funds groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and jihadist groups around the world. But secondly, they would also say that it would be important to retain diplomatic relations with Tehran because the IRGC was the ruling party of the country. So it was a bit different to a terrorist group, so to speak. And they said because of that, diplomatic relations, access to, allies, if there are any, in Iran was really important, and prescribing would cut off all of that vital access. I heavily disputed that claim, but unfortunately, mandarins won the day on that.
And that'll be the same argument that's being made to this government, that we have to maintain relations with a completely murderous and brutal regime. Yeah. But what advantage do relations give us with a regime like this?
Quite. Actually, the UK is on the receiving end of a big threat posed by the IRGC. When I was Home Secretary, as you mentioned, I was dealing with the direct effects of IRGC actions. There were IRGC proxies who were intimidating people, threatening to kidnap people, and carry out criminal acts in the UK, on UK soil. The Director General of MI5, Ken McCullum, has been very open about the threat posed to the UK and UK nationals in our country by the IRGC. Iran International was the case in point. A dissident Iranian broadcaster had an office in London, and when I was Home Secretary, broadcasters and people who worked at that TV show were intimidated by IRGC proxies. They were forced to shut down and move their location. It was absolutely unacceptable, despite the extra security that we put on. But that was a real example, a real-world example on UK soil of what the IRGC and their proxies are willing to do.
And their willingness to carry out and fund terrorist activities outside the borders of Iran, but also to act as terrorists within Iran. Yep. We hear that they may have killed thousands of people to try and prop up the regime. So we are supping with a very wicked regime and seem to be not only powerless but inert in response to it.
Absolutely. So there's direct thuggery on individuals and kidnapping threats, but there's also obviously the terrorism threat. This is an Islamist, extremist terrorist organisation, and Hamas is funded by them, Palestine Action, all these sorts of extremist groups that we prescribe and are very happy to call terrorists are funded indirectly or directly by the IRGC. And extremist preachers, other terrorist activity in the UK and around the world has often a link to the IRGC. I often call it the head of the snake, because if you trace back far enough, you will find Iran and the IRGC as a supporter, sponsor or funder of very, very dangerous activity.
And the Americans have banned the IRGC and we haven't. What is the difference in the American approach? Why have they felt comfortable prescribing the organisation when they have the same diplomatic interests, you would have thought, as we do?
Yeah. Well, again, Mandarins would say to us that, well, the Americans now regret their decision to have prescribed the IRGC because they've lost valuable relationships with insiders in Iran, and they really are warning the UK not to go down the same path. I think that was all rubbish, frankly. They just didn't want to take a step which was, I think they thought was slightly unorthodox, and they were, you know, the whole mentality, really, of Foreign Office civil servants is not one of muscularity. It's not one of robustness. It's not really one that puts the British national interest first, I have to say.
And we didn't have a Palmerston in the Foreign Office. Suella, as always, it's a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much for coming on today. In a moment.
I think the issue is that because I was a gay man in his circle, I was kept separate from what he was doing in the sexual side.
Lord Mandelson has given his first interview since being forced out of his role as the US ambassador, or our ambassador to the US, over his links to the disgraced paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, suggesting he did not know about Epstein's crimes because he's gay, and then he refused to apologise. Is it unfair to taint someone by association, or will this interview become Mandelson's Prince Andrew moment?
Do you trust what you're being told? Good, because neither do I.
Those are just facts.
I'm Alex Armstrong, and on my show, we'll expose the spin.
Well, I want to answer that, because you didn't let me last time, because you always speak over me.
The broken promises.
To deny that is denying the truth.
And the hypocrisy.
We can allow. You think we can allow?
Politics, policy, parliament. Nothing is off limits. No sugarcoating, no fear of offence, just the truth laid bare. Tune in every Saturday and Sunday at 9 p.m. for Alex Armstrong Tonight, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country. There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor. Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Well, has Lord Mandelson had his Prince Andrew moment? He's given his first interview since being sacked as the ambassador of the United Kingdom to the United States over his links to the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein.
I think the issue is that because I was a gay man in his circle, I was kept separate from what he was doing in the sexual side.
The Labour peer who left office in September says he was unaware of Epstein's crimes, claiming he was kept separate from that side of his life because he is gay. He then declined to apologise for his association with Epstein. Is this unfair guilt by association, given there's no claim or evidence against him? Or is it his Prince Andrew moment, with once again a figure close to Epstein refusing to apologise for knowing somebody who turns out to be so loathsome? Well, my panel is here, Sir John Redwood and Stephen Pound. Stephen, it doesn't seem to me to be a clever interview, that surely he would learn from Prince Andrew and begin by saying, I am sorry.
Which is exactly what he did. He did say, I apologise to all those unfortunate young women, you know, who
But he was then specifically asked to apologise for continuing his association, and he said he wouldn't.
Just get one thing absolutely clear. If somebody's guilty by association, Margaret Thatcher would never have gone into the House of Lords because she was as close to Jimmy Savile. She invited him to her country house, she invited him to Downing Street, she proposed him for a knighthood, and the Pope actually nominated Jimmy Savile for...
Yeah.
If it's guilty...
But the Pope didn't go and stay on Jimmy Savile's private island on the Lolita Express.
Well, no, but Margaret Thatcher invited Jimmy Savile to her private home. So, look, guilt by association is a very easy thing to do. I happen to think that losing Mandelson as our ambassador to Washington is a tragedy for this country. I think he was doing a damn good job, and I worked with him in Northern Ireland. I saw how he worked with people, apparently irreconcilable forces. He's a very, very good, but unfortunately, he flies too close to the sun sometimes.
And is taken in by very rich people. That's been his downfall every single time. But he was very close to Epstein. It wasn't just he met him at a party once. He was staying on his island. There's that photograph of him in a toweling dressing gown. It's very unlikely that...
I have to say, talking about Margaret Thatcher and Jimmy Savile, I don't think Margaret Thatcher ever would have addressed Jimmy Savile as her best pal. And I think that's the difference. It's a difference.
And Margaret Thatcher would have kept a certain distance between herself and somebody like that, but inevitably Prime Ministers meet celebrities. But it's...
Well, and she wouldn't have carried on with him once the crimes were obvious.
Well, neither would Peter Mandelson.
But he did. That's the problem. But Mandelson keeps on seeing Epstein even after he's had his first conviction. He goes back to him, the dog returning to his vomit. He goes back to Epstein. And now he's trying to say, well, I didn't see anything. It seems very unlikely from all the photographs of Epstein's house that you wouldn't have, if you'd stayed there, seen... This is unusual decoration.
Well, there's nothing being alleged about Lord Mandelson's conduct and behaviour, but it's been a disaster for our nation because this is a crucial relationship with a very powerful President of the United States of America. And the Prime Minister invested great support in Lord Mandelson as the man to do it. I don't think the President wanted us to change ambassadors. At that point, he was very happy with the career ambassador we had. Mandelson was put in, he was just beginning to get some favours from President, and then he opens up by his past conduct and associations the very thing the President of the United States doesn't want to dog him because he has committed no crimes and he doesn't see why he should be associated with it. So it was a disaster for our key relationship. And Lord Mandelson, who's always been very clever at handling the press and spinning things, surely he would learn in the way you're advising him that to have interviews like this doesn't help. It just goes over the coals and allows his enemies to make implied allegations.
It's just a reminder of where he was, how close he was. Yeah. And it does seem to me to be very like Prince Andrew, that it's not a clever interview to have done.
Well, I don't think it's a direct read across. I mean, Prince Andrew took a huge amount of money from various people, you know, and then, I can't imagine Peter Mandelson borrowing £2.5 million off his mum to pay somebody off. I mean, that just isn't the same. But look, the evil of people like Savile and Epstein is so deep that sometimes you almost have some sympathy. I mean, I had lunch with Rolf Harris a few times, and I never would have guessed in a million years that he was a wrong-un.
But you didn't stay on his private island.
Good God, no! I didn't even pay for dinner. Oh, no, I did pay for the lunch.
That's the thing.
Well, and you then condemned him, presumably, when you knew what was the truth.
Well, I'm still not entirely sure what the truth was, but I mean, had I been asked, I would, of course, condemned. No question at all about that. But it's a tragedy that a person, you rightly talk about the skill that Peter Mandelson had. You know, he was very, very skillful. And I think the reason he did this interview is because he still feels absolutely bitter to his heart and soul. He thinks that he was thrown under the bus. He thinks that the Prime Minister acted precipitously. And he doesn't actually see what this looks like to the woman and the man
but
in the
But
street.
then 3 times in his career this has happened. So for all the skills that he did have on media, he had a disastrous capacity for everything to go hopelessly wrong.
The work he did in Northern
And he
Ireland
became the story in a very bad way.
He's a very clever man. He's a very able man. But your point's absolutely right. He flies too close to the sun and has a distorted view of money.
Well, there's a magnetism about money. Don't forget, to this day, nobody knows where Jeffrey Epstein got his money from. There's no evidence whatsoever that he actually owned anything. It's all by favours and possibly...
Yes, it is.
I'm choosing my words with great care.
Who knows the secret of the black magic box, indeed.
Only the shadow knows.
Anyway, that's all from me. It's been all sorts of unpleasant stories this evening. Anyway, up next is the one and only Patrick Christys. Patrick, I hope you're going to raise the tone from all these sex scandals I've been covering. I've been like the news of the world of old tonight.
If only.
No, I intend to roll around in the gutter like I always do, Jacob. So we are going to be talking about whether or not Nadeem Zahawi is a good signing for reform. It's certainly been controversial. It turns out that very controversial police chief in the West Midlands, well, the leader of a local mosque helped to appoint him. We've also got a story about a radical Islamist preacher who might be on his way to Britain. Should Keir Starmer prescribe the IRGC? And Musk versus Starmer, the war is still on over X.
Warm and cosy, with a chance of zero visibility. Boxed Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello again. Very good evening to you. I'm here with your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Quite a mixed picture across the UK as we go through tonight and into tomorrow. Some places will see some mist and fog patches, other places having some outbreaks of rain. Although the area of low pressure, which has brought strong winds across northern parts through today, is now clearing, and so those winds are dropping out, we do have a front pushing in across parts of Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, and later into parts of northern England and Wales, where we are going to see some wet weather at times. Staying mostly dry there across central southern England and Wales. Cloud building through the night, some low clouds, some mist quite possible, and actually staying quite mild here. Temperatures not dropping a huge amount. Markedly colder though across northern parts of Scotland where we have clear skies. As a result, a relatively harsh frost in some places, and also some icy stretches to watch out for. Could cause some problems on the roads first thing tomorrow morning. Otherwise, as we go through tomorrow morning, well, it's a bright, cold, icy start across northern Scotland, across western southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of northern England and Wales. A wet start with that front pushing its way in, and then another front's coming up from the south, so it could be quite a bit of rain across southern counties as you're heading out the door tomorrow morning, and that rain then pushes its way northeastwards across much of central and eastern parts of southern England as well. Some of that rain could be quite heavy as we go through the day. It could cause some localised flooding in a few spots. That front towards the northwest also makes its way south and eastwards across other parts of England and Wales, with something a bit cooler coming in from the northwest. Not as cold as last week, but nonetheless a chillier feel compared to today. Then after a cold and quite widely frosty start to the day tomorrow, it is actually looking largely fine. Lots of bright sunny weather to be had through the bulk of the day, but there's another system coming in from the west, and that's going to bring some cloud and rain as we go later on. Now on Thursday there's a potential for a deep area of low pressure to push in, so that could bring some very strong winds and heavy rain.
Warm and cosy, with a chance of zero visibility. Boxed Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
There's just 3 weeks left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize to date. An incredible £85,000 in tax-free cash could be yours. Cash to make 2026 the year of yes. That's yes to holidays, yes to treats, yes to making all of those dreams come true this year. Just make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win £85,000 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50.